Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are doing this. Nihilist Wrestling Episode 2. I am your host, Ash Manson. I'm happy to be here. Thank you everyone who watched Episode 1. Just on a personal note, my personal Facebook profile got hacked recently and deactivated, and with that, the Nihilist Wrestling Facebook page was also deactivated, so still looking into getting that resolved. There wasn't a heck of a lot of activity there just yet, so I'm not going to worry about recreating it until I know what's going on with all that. Unfortunately, that's probably where the bulk of my views were coming from, so now I am at the mercy of the YouTube algorithm. Ain't that a great place to be? Well, we got a few things to talk about here today, so let's just get right into it. AEW Revolution has came and gone, and it was one hell of a show. Sting definitely, as I hoped he would, went out in a blaze of glory. Honestly, as I said in my last video, even if the pay-per-view was a train wreck, I thought his run in AEW was just perfect. It was the perfect exclamation point at the end of a legendary career, and that match was absolutely incredible. Darby Allin is insane. That bump with going off of the ladder through the pane of glass, like watching that as a wrestling fan, you appreciate the lengths that he's willing to go to entertain us. But at the same time, I'm watching that and I'm like, I don't need you to be doing all that, man. That's a little much. Made me a little uncomfortable seeing how bad his back was bleeding, but it definitely demonstrated that he cared. I thought that Sting was going to advocate to lose that match, and in the post-event media scrum, he did state as much. He never wanted to be champion, never advocated to be undefeated, wanted to put over the Bucks on the way out, but Tony Khan was just so dedicated to giving Sting that proper send-off that he never got in WWE, that he basically made an executive decision for Sting to end his AEW career undefeated. I absolutely loved the show. Tony said it was one of the greatest pay-per-views in AEW history, and I gotta say that I don't entirely agree with that. And that's not a criticism of AEW. That is just a testament to the baseline that they have set with their pay-per-views. Every time I order an AEW pay-per-view, and I do order every single one, I just expect a level of greatness, and they deliver every single time. I don't think Revolution particularly stood out. And when I say this, I don't want to get you the wrong impression of what I'm going to do here on this channel, because I see a lot of wrestling fans that their entire purpose of starting their own wrestling group or their own wrestling channel is just to shit on and criticize and fantasy book pro wrestling. That is absolutely not what I'm trying to do here. I'm just saying that Revolution was a pretty standard great AEW pay-per-view and not one of their best necessarily. Now, the Sting Darby match versus the Young Bucks, that was absolutely a highlight. The show didn't exactly make me feel I can't wait to watch Dynamite to see what happens next, because they just didn't give a whole lot to give me that feeling. The world title match was a bit of a punt, I would say. I said I wasn't too concerned if Swerve didn't win the title, and I mean that, and he didn't, and it seemed at the end there when Samoa Joe, he had Hangman Page in the Coquina clutch, and Hangman tapped out, and I think, was it Tony Schiavone said something along the lines of is he tapping just to make sure that Swerve doesn't get the title? It elongated that awesome program that they have between Swerve and Hangman, so we didn't get the conclusion at the pay-per-view. We didn't get, We didn't get that historic moment, Swerve becoming the first African-American AEW World Champion, but I feel it's coming, and when it does come, I definitely feel it's going to feel like the time was right to do it. If it happened at Revolution, maybe it could have felt a bit rushed. for sure. I mean, I was still hoping it was going to happen, but it might have felt a bit rushed. They're just building up to that big moment for Swerve, and I can't wait to see it. Definitely can't wait to see it. Yeah, and I got a couple thoughts about Dynamite. I like the new presentation. My only like the new stage setup where they have the old tunnels, like the babyface and the heel tunnel for separate entrances. But that was kind of like a nod to the old school Dynamite set, but with the bigger surface area for the Titantron and all that. It definitely has more of like a big time, like a major company feel to it. That's not necessarily just because it more looks like what WWE's set is. It just, I don't know. The production value felt like an upgrade. I didn't like that blue and red Dynamite look. It just gave me Raw and SmackDown vibes. The only real criticism I'm kind of fighting off is it was so colorful that I'm almost kind of thinking NXT 2.0 when I see that Dynamite set, but it didn't quite rise to that level of cringe. Overall, I'd say I like it a lot. They set up Edge versus Christian number 3 at the Dynamite next week in Ontario. Edge or Adam Copeland. Normally, I don't like to dead name wrestlers. I'm not going to say Sasha Banks. I'm not going to say Daniel Bryan. I just really like the name Edge, and I feel like if Adam Copeland had access to the name Edge, he would still be using it. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't know. It just feels right. He was Edge for so long. I'm going to call him Edge, unless he comes out and says that he hates when people call him Edge. But in a recent interview, he said that he still responds and appreciates when people use the name. So for now, Edge it is. Can't wait for Edge versus Christian, match number 3. That's going to be epic next week. And another thing about Dynamite is they started off with that Swerve promo and all that. And I also, and I swear this is related, I heard that QT Marshall was rehired by AEW. And the rumor that why he left was, well, number one, he wanted to wrestle elsewhere, and that he's still going to have the opportunity to do, he's only going to work in a creative capacity, as far as what's been reported. But number two is, it was rumored that he didn't like the direction that AEW was going. And again, this is all, allegedly, just based on reports that I read online. They could be bullshit for all I know, but it's just what I've read, and I'm just kind of speculating here. He didn't like that they were moving away from the storylines, the more, the language that Tony Khan kept using around the Continental Classic time was sports-based presentation. That they're moving to a sports-based presentation and away from, the more storyline, storytelling aspect of, of wrestling. And this might be an unpopular opinion among those who favor AEW over WWE. And I will be honest, I am one of those people. You put a gun to my head. I love both promotions. But you put a gun to my head and you ask me, AEW or WWE, I'm going to say AEW. However, I think presenting pro wrestling in a strictly sports-based presentation style kind of insults the intelligence of your audience, and it also doesn't maximize the, just the potential of the art form, right? And here's what I mean by that. I love good quality pro wrestling matches. I love great matches, and that's part of the reason why I like AEW better than WWE. They consistently have better matches. However, I feel pro wrestling is at its best when you care who wins. Why is there all this hype over the WrestleMania main event coming up? Because people want Cody Rhodes to win. Why was Sami Zayn hype at a fever pitch at this point last year? People wanted him to win the world title. What's the big, the deal with Swerve? Why all the hype? People want him to win the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. You get people to care about who wins and who loses with promos, with storylines, with character development. And in some ways, AEW has been lacking with that recently. And I'm going to point to the Continental Classic. And I liked the Continental Classic. I was actually there I was in Oklahoma City when they had Dynamite there during the Continental Classic, and the following week I was in Orlando and I saw the Continental Classic was still going on. And those matches were absolute bangers and I loved them. They were great. The only thing about it is that the Continental Classic consumed so much television time that I don't think they had the ability to build enough feuds, to tell enough stories, to make people care who wins and loses. They did kind of turn the Continental Classic into a little bit of a story towards the end, with Eddie Kingston being behind at the beginning and, his like typical underdog arc and all that. And that was great. It's just like when the Continental Classic was going on, and again, I can't emphasize enough, I'm not hating on the Continental Classic. It's just I like that and other stuff. When the Continental Classic was coming, your show is going to be at least 50%, if not more than that, consumed with Continental Classic matches. No story, just ring the bell, ding, 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 may the best man win. I don't think that strictly sports-based presentation maximizes the art form. Again, love pro wrestling, love great matches, but you gotta make sure that people care about who wins and loses. Otherwise, you're just watching great matches. I thought that having that Swerve Pro promo really helped. It helped us care. I mean, not that I needed any help caring about that, but it almost it seems like there was a little bit more focus on storytelling than there have been in previous months, and I like to see that. And again, I don't want them to turn into WWE when the program is 60% promos and just going on. And the problem with WWE is not that there's too much talking, it's that a lot of the talking is cheesy and uninteresting. AEW is phenomenal at storytelling. They have told some of the best stories in wrestling over the past few years. I think they need to balance it. Be heavier on the pro wrestling than WWE, because that's what they do best. But don't be afraid to tell a good story. I hope that, QT Marshall coming back and, seeing what they're doing with Swerve and all that, I hope that they recognize that there's a balance to be struck there. But I'm looking forward to the show, regardless of what they're doing. Definitely jiving with what AEW's putting on television lately, and I swear I'm going to talk about WWE at some point. As a matter of fact, let's get into it. Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. Yep, we're going to talk about them together. The babyface of old and the babyface of new. And you might be thinking to yourself, isn't Drew a heel now? And he is, but is he? Cody Rhodes, why do I characterize him as the babyface of old? Because he is just the typical white bread do-gooder babyface. Just the wearing the suit, the super polite, the smiling, the whoa, American flag, yada yada yada. He's so babyface that it makes me cringe, but I cannot dislike Cody, no matter how cringe I find all that, because not only is just Cody Rhodes the smiling babyface, but he has indie cred. He left WWE, he went to Evolve, to Ring of Honor, to New Japan, to TNA. He was a member of the Bullet Club. And of course, definitely, last but not least, he helped start AEW. He legitimized so much of the wrestling scene that WWE ignored for so long. And the fact that all of that served as like a launching pad for him to be the number one babyface now in WWE, it's like, yeah, you can find the smiling and kissing babies cringe, but you can't hate Cody. Like, not only do I not hate Cody, like, I am a massive Cody fan. He strikes me as incredibly genuine. And, like, I know, like, it's difficult to be a pure white bread good guy. You see how that went for John Cena. John Cena was so polarized for so long, and I do believe John Cena is a genuine good guy. Actually, the John Cena, like the real John Cena, in my opinion, is a lot easier to root for than the John Cena you see on TV, because John Cena in WWE is kind of a caricature good guy. Never give up, never quit, salute, and be all animated on the microphone, wear bright colors, and just it's the John Cena character is cringe, and I think like. And Cena himself understands that his character is more oriented to young children and like, women fans. It just, I'm not his target audience with his character. Whereas Cody Rhodes he has gone through the hoops and done the things to earn the respect of the die-hard, like, alternative pro wrestling fan in a way that John Cena never did. And again, this isn't really a criticism of John Cena. I'm just contrasting him because, like, John Cena was very, like, polarizing, whereas I think people are... No, I mean, not everyone agrees on anything, but, like, I haven't seen a more consensus we love this guy than I do with Cody Rhodes. And, yeah, it's because he does the good guy thing so well, and you believe it, and it's genuine, and you really think it's Cody Runnels Rhodes out there just pouring his heart out, and his story with his dad is just so sympathetic, and it's just, you can't help but root for the guy. But Drew McIntyre, on the other hand, like, he's a bad guy, he beats up on the good guy, but he also kind of has an explanation where what he does is plausible. Like, he was pissed off at Jey Uso because the bloodline cost him his Universal Championship match at Clash at the Castle. And that was his moment. And I want to say it was Solo that fucked him more than anyone. But Jey Uso was at the very least, like, complicit. And Drew comes to Raw, and he sees that, Jay comes to Raw, and then he sees that all of a sudden everyone's slapping hands with Jey Uso, like, oh, it's all cool now. Well, Drew remembers, and then Jay never apologized to him. He still hasn't. And it's just kind of like, even if you think that Drew is, like, being irrational, you kind of see where he's coming from. And, like CM Punk, Drew doesn't like CM Punk, and CM Punk is my second favorite wrestler of all time, behind only Shawn X-Pac Waltman. But you can also kind of see why Drew doesn't like CM Punk. Like, Drew went the Cody Rhodes route. Well, actually, Drew went the Drew Galloway / McIntyre route. He was the one who did it first. He's the one that, like, worked his way through the indies, through Evolve and all that. And he made himself, he was TNA World Champion, he made himself undeniable. So, like, I remember, like, seeing him work at Evolve in Tampa. I saw him wrestle Roderick Strong. And my wife, who's only kind of casually, like, she's not super into wrestling, but she'll watch it with me, and she she likes some things more than others. She still references that match between Drew McIntyre, Drew Galloway at the time, and Roderick Strong from time to time. Like, Drew grinded and grinded and grinded to get to the spot where he was at, and then CM Punk just, like, he relentlessly shits on WWE for good reason. And then just kind of like, he joins the Challenger brand, has his run in AEW, and I'm not going to get too far into that right now. But that didn't last for too long, got a good 2 years out of it, and just waltzes back into WWE and wants his main event spot at WrestleMania. Drew McIntyre has every right to be pissed at CM Punk. Whether or not we like the fact that he doesn't like CM Punk or not, we can kind of see where he's coming from. And this more recent thing with Seth Rollins, right? Seth Rollins is getting all up in the bloodline business when he's the World Heavyweight Championship. The World Heavyweight Champion. He has to defend his title at WrestleMania against Drew McIntyre, and he's worried about Roman Reigns and The Rock. That does actually, in real life, kind of take the shine away from the World Heavyweight Championship that Drew is trying to obtain. So yeah, Drew has every right to be pissed off at Seth Rollins. And sure, he's a bad guy. He beats up on the good guy. But is he really bad? Who here doesn't like Drew McIntyre because of his behavior in the past couple months? Drew McIntyre is the modern day babyface. Who are the big baby faces during the Attitude Era? Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, right? They talked all kinds of shit and they backed it up in the ring. Well, Drew McIntyre, he talks a lot of shit. How did LA Knight get so popular recently? Because he's a trash talker. People like when wrestlers have an edge to them. Cody and Drew are such a contrast. Cody's so old school and Drew is so new. AEW presents a lot of their good guys like that, or they blur the lines. Our Blackpool Combat Club, are they baby faces or heels? I guess they're heels, but who doesn't like Jon Moxley, Bryan Danielson, Claudio Castagnoli? Who doesn't like them? I like how there's ambiguity here. Drew is the bad guy heading into his title match at WrestleMania, but is he really? Because as much as we all love Seth Rollins, Drew deserves his moment. He won the main event of WrestleMania in 2020 when there wasn't a damn person in the crowd, and he deserves it. I feel like the chip on his shoulder is well deserved, and that's what makes his character so compelling now, the way that the lines are blurred. And I really look forward to seeing what he does in the future. What if Cody and Drew were to collide? Who's the bad guy in that equation? That's fascinating, and I can't wait to see the way that it plays out. Alright, last thing I want to talk about is the Maxxine Dupri situation where she was booed and ridiculed at a recent house show. I know the way that wrestling news cycles work, this is old news by now, but I said I was going to talk about it, so I'm going to talk about it. And to recap, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, at a recent house show, Maxxine Dupri, who's very new to the wrestling business, was very loudly booed, and fans were yelling, "You suck," not necessarily because she's a heel, she's actually a babyface, but because she's pretty bad at wrestling. And I saw people offering their opinions. I saw Rhea Ripley come to her defense, say all y'all need to be better humans. Becky Lynch said, hey, if I could choose a tag team partner, it would be Maxxine Dupri, in response to all that. Whereas Dave Meltzer was saying that, pro wrestling fans spend their hard-earned money to come to these events, and they have the right to say anything that they want. And Dave Meltzer isn't necessarily wrong, but I'm going to say, generally speaking, if you have to invoke your right to do something as a justification for it, it's normally a sign that you're probably not acting the best way that you possibly can. Just kind of a cultural example, there's a mass shooting, as they happen all the time in the United States, and people clutch their AR-15s and say, I have the right to own this. Alright, I don't know what well-regulated militia you belong to. Maybe you need to reread the Second Amendment. But even if you have the right to do something, doesn't mean that you're not an asshole for doing so. And I have to come down on the side of yes. Fans have the right to taunt Maxxine Dupri. They spend their hard-earned money to come to the show. They can yell what they want, but they're also assholes for doing so, and they should not be doing that. And if you want to get mad at anyone, get mad at management or whoever booked that show for putting her in that position. But at the same time, it's a house show. That's where you're supposed to get reps. People can say that, well, maybe she should be down in NXT honing her craft, and maybe there's a little bit of truth to that, but they also, need her on the road with Alpha Academy, so maybe the logistics of that don't exactly work out the way they should. And wrestling fans do have the way, they have the right to react the way they should. And I'm going to I'm going to point to a different scenario, and I referenced this a little bit earlier in the video, where at the height of John Cena's run, he was very polarizing. You'd hear, let's go Cena, Cena sucks, and John Cena, loved every moment of it. He couldn't have been more professional. He one time announced that he got hurt, and he was going to miss some time, and the fans popped for that. And I heard him on an interview with Chris Van Vliet recently. Chris asked Cena about that, and he's like, well, were they quiet? All right, then. So that it's just fine. And wow, my hat's off to Cena for, being so classy, but that's still fucked up. Yeah, I don't think you should be yelling at wrestlers saying you suck at wrestling and all that. I mean, you can, but I think as much as I use it as a comparison, Cena and Maxxine Dupri were in very different situations, because Cena was being booed because he was shoved so forcefully down our throat. I don't feel personally affronted by Maxxine Dupri having a house show match. That, to me, that's fine. She is a value add in the presentation to Alpha Academy, and I appreciated her work on making it maximum. I don't know if you've heard of that, but the Maximum Male Models had a YouTube series, and Mace, Mansoor, and Maxxine absolutely knocked that out of the park. There's definitely value in having her on television. I mean, Alpha Academy doesn't necessarily do much for me, but maybe they do to other people. In short, I land on the side of, sure, say what you want, but you're a fucking dick for saying it. And I want to get into another situation where I thought the crowd was just being mean, and I want to talk about it a little bit because it's fascinating. We're going to go back to Cody Rhodes. Towards the end of his AEW career, he was being booed relentlessly, and it wasn't because he was a heel, it was because he was too white bread of a babyface. Maybe that was his sign that he needed to be in WWE. As much as I hate it, because honestly, as much as Cody is killing it in WWE now, as somebody who appreciates AEW more, I wish he was still in AEW. Love his work in WWE, but, if I had it my way, he'd still be in AEW, and so would CM Punk. I know that's controversial, and there's a damn good reason that Punk's not there, but, just my personal preferences, not saying it's right necessarily. Fans were being rude to Cody because he is just so genuine of a good guy, and they appreciate good guys that are a little bit more rough around the edges, let's say Hangman Page was at the time, or Swerve. I'm not really sure if he's supposed to be a good guy or a bad guy. You can argue that he turned face on Dynamite, but there's more of an ambiguity in who's good and who's bad, and that white bread style of baby faceness doesn't really, jive with AEW. But I thought the crowd was being kind of inappropriate with just how relentlessly they booed Cody. And when asked in interviews, did that push you away from AEW? Cody said absolutely not. I loved it. And he's like, actually, I was a heel. He was like, He's like, the way that you properly be a heel in this business is you take something away. He said that crowd so wanted him to turn heel that he was being a heel by continuing to be a babyface or act like a babyface despite them booing him. That wasn't even evident to me at the time. But he said he was bumping and feeding for the people that were getting cheered over him and all that. So maybe it just went over my head. As analytical as I am normally, I just wasn't grasping it at the time. But that was an example of, I think, wrestling fans were being they're being assholes. But hey, we all got our rights. We paid our money. You can say whatever you want to say. But I didn't like it. Same way I didn't like when WWE would be having a Hall of Fame, and they would pan to John Cena and people would boo him. And I get it, Cena's being forced down our throats and all that, but we're looking at John Cena the man there, not the character. So I didn't like when people would boo him in that context. But again, say what you want. These are just my thoughts, and we're going a little bit long now. Feel free to share your thoughts on anything that I said. Leave it in the comments if you don't mind. If you wouldn't mind throwing me a like and a subscribe if you got this far. And hey, I'll look forward to seeing you guys next time on Nihilist Wrestling.